Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
You can go home, the gray-haired man in the white uniform smiled. Aglaya smiled tiredly and began to put her stuff in her bag. The trauma doctor immersed himself in paperwork, allowing the nurse to finally go home. Her shift had ended an hour and a half ago, but hospital work ended not by the clock, but when there was an opportunity to finish a shift. The petite, beautiful nurse with shoulder-length hair said goodbye to her colleague and started to go downstairs when suddenly someone called out to her. "Aglaya, I've been looking for you everywhere. There's a man waiting for you for 2 hours. We told him that you were helping the doctor, that people were delivered after the car accident and there was a lot of work to do, but he still decided to wait for you," the receptionist told her. "Okay, thank you." Aglaya was confused. Waiting for 2 hours? Who could it be? Only one option came to her mind. It could only be Cassiano. Maybe he's come to his senses and decided to come back? That thought made her soul feel warm. Aglaya ran down the stairs and saw a man in the reception area, blonde hair, tall, slim, dark skin. He was wearing a simple black t-shirt and pants. "That's not Cassiano." Aglaya pressed her lips together unhappily, sighed, and headed towards him. She recognized him. The man's name was Alejandro. Recently, he was admitted to their hospital after a car accident, and Aglaya took a big part in saving his life. She had a day shift, and then replaced her colleague on the night shift. Her colleague's father was seriously ill, and the girl couldn't leave him alone. Finally, both shifts were over, and exhausted Aglaya was going home with only one wish: to get some sleep. Halfway home she saw an accident. A drunken truck driver hit a passenger car. Thoughts of exhaustion and sleep immediately evaporated. Aglaya rushed to the car, opened the door, and saw a man inside. He was unconscious. There was no one around. Aglaya dragged him away from the car, laid him down on the sidewalk, and dialed the hospital's number. The ambulance rushed to the scene, while the girl tried to bring the man to his senses. Just as he opened his eyes, his car exploded. The drunken truck driver walked around, apologizing profusely. Aglaya referred the injured man to her hospital, to her trauma unit, and 2 days later, she met him again. They developed quite a warm, friendly relationship. They talked a lot and discussed their favorite movies and music. The guy stayed there for a week and tried to give her money when he was about to be discharged. But Aglaya didn't take the money, as always, and even felt offended. So they said goodbye to each other in an awkward way, and now this guy's been waiting here for 2 hours. Maybe he wants to ask her out on a date. Aglaya shivered. He was nice, but she wasn't ready for a relationship right now. She'd just gone through a painful divorce. It had only been 3 months since a new mark had appeared on her passport. "Good afternoon," he said. "Hello, Alejandro. How are you doing? Did the headaches go away?" Aglaya asked. "I'm fine, thank you. Thanks to your help, I'm recovering very quickly. I've been waiting for you. I really need to talk to you. Let's go to the cafe, it won't take long." Aglaya shrugged and agreed. Lately, the walls of her home felt like a prison to her, so she was in no hurry to get there. They were sitting in a cafe that was usually crowded, but today there were only staff in yellow aprons. Small round tables, uncomfortable chairs. Alejandro ordered coffee and a dessert for Aglaya, and only black tea for himself. "Aglaya, I invited you here because I need your help. I'm not the kind of guy who has a lot of female friends. I'm shy enough, and it's hard for me to meet new people. Me and my ex broke up in a pretty bad way, so I can't ask her for such an unusual favor. But for some reason, I felt like I could trust you, so I thought I'd ask you. You saved my life and cured me." The guy was nervous, and his blonde bangs were getting in his eyes. "I didn't do anything special, that's my job. You don't owe me anything. What's the request?" Aglaya wanted to leave. This whole thing felt weird and awkward. This guy could hardly offer her anything that would interest her. "Don't be so modest. You got me out of the car, and then it exploded. But I've learned my lesson and I won't offer you money ever again, I promise." but my request will be something very personal and strange. I'll tell you all about it and you just tell me if you agree or not. I won't insist. If you say no, I won't bother you again. So, I need a fake wedding. I'd like you to be my wife for a while. It may take a few months, but after that, we will divorce. Aglaya lowered her head. Divorce. She's definitely not gonna survive another divorce. Why do you need this? She didn't know how to refuse him politely. Don't worry, it's not some machinations, nothing dirty or illegal. Except for a sham marriage, apparently. The guy shook his head, took her hand, and looked into her eyes. I promise I won't molest you, there won't be any intimacy. All I want is publicity. I need everyone to know that I got married. I can pay for it, any sum of money. But I really need it urgently. I can't give you all the details, it'll be too boring. It's a bureaucratic necessity, nothing more. Aglaya thought about it. He needs the publicity. So her ex will find out that she got married 3 months after the divorce. Awesome. At least she'd get back at him for everything. After all, she has nothing to lose. What could be worse than the lifestyle she was living now? Aglaya raised her eyes and looked at her interlocutor through thick dark lashes. I agree, and no need to pay for that. Alejandro smiled. Do you really agree? You can't imagine how grateful I am. This is the second time you're saving me. Then from now on, you can tell everyone that we're a couple. It's important that everyone believes it. I promise you won't regret the decision to help me. Soon Alejandro said goodbye to the girl, paid the waiter, and left. Aglaya slowly finished her coffee and left. On the way home, she thought that now at least something would start to happen in her life. It was important to her. The emptiness she felt when she was alone frightened her. Aglaya climbed the stairs to the second floor, opened the door, and entered. It was warm and quiet inside. It was always hot in the apartment in summer, but this year August had been extremely cool because of a cyclone. The weather forecasters had promised that summer would return in September, but for now, the temperature would be relatively cold. She sat on the sofa, her glance focused on the picture on the nightstand. It showed her in a wedding dress and her ex-husband, Cassiano. They were smiling. Weren't you happy with me? She asked aloud. She still remembered Cassiano begging her to marry him. Cassiano was her classmate. Aglaya hadn't noticed him at school, but when they both graduated and met by chance on the street, they looked at each other in a completely different way. Cassiano confessed that he loved her during their school years. But Aglaya noticed the guy only now. In high school, he was an unattractive, shy guy, but now he had completely changed. He had everything: a good sense of humor, charisma, good manners, beautiful eyes, and a smile. She thought that such a guy could not be single, and Cassiano told her that he had just broken up with his girlfriend. They were preparing for their wedding when she cheated on him with her best friend. He saw it and left. Cassiano moved to a big city because of that girl, but when he saw her in the arms of another guy, he just packed up, and 18 hours later, he was already in his provincial hometown. Cassiano wooed her nicely, but Aglaya thought he was just trying to forget the girl who cheated on him. Cassiano said he was madly in love with her and that the past was left behind. They had a whirlwind romance and soon, he proposed to her. Aglaya was over the moon. They got married. The wedding was incredibly beautiful and fun. They invited all their friends and relatives. But soon the problems began. Right after the wedding, Aglaya started trying to get pregnant, and her husband was happy about it. He said he wanted 4 children. It didn't work, no matter how many times they tried. Doctors mentioned a possible incompatibility. Many doctors examined them in different clinics, but all of them said that they were both healthy. But at the last clinic they went to, Aglaya was told she would probably never have children. In this clinic, the girl underwent a thorough examination, and the doctors identified several problems. She underwent treatment, and she prayed, but nothing helped. During the second year of marriage, the relationship with Cassiano began to deteriorate. He didn't say it directly, but it was clear that the problem was his wife's infertility. The man dreamed of a large family, and with Aglaya it was impossible. Aglaya had already realized that there was no future for them, but they were still in love. They didn't dare to just break up, they simply left things as they were. In the 3rd year of their marriage, Aglaya noticed that Cassiano started coming home late. He smelled of the same women's perfume, and there were traces of lipstick on his shirt collar. She understood what was going on, but didn't dare to talk about it. She began to ask direct questions only in the 4th year of marriage. She knew he had another woman. And he lied to Aglaya, looking her in the eye, but he didn't dare to divorce her. She didn't understand why he wasn't divorcing her, but didn't dare to take that irrevocable step either. Deep in her heart, she hoped that things would get better, that he would come to his senses and break up with his mistress. She wanted to adopt a child and even attended foster parenting classes, but soon Cassiano decided to leave her. It was a week before the 5th anniversary of their marriage. He came home from work and started packing his clothes into the suitcase. "A business trip?" she asked, standing in the doorway. "No. I'm leaving you." Aglaya made a puzzled expression on her face. "Where will you go?" she asked. "To her. I've always loved her, you knew that. She even moved here from another city so we could see each other more often. We dated secretly for a few years, and now she's expecting my baby. And I can't tear myself between 2 women. I have to be with her. I hope you will understand me." It was only then that Aglaya realized how stupid it was to believe in a miracle. He was in love with another woman from the very beginning. She saw it, but she didn't want to believe her eyes. She wanted to cry and burst into hysterics, but only smiled and said, "Be happy." Cassiano shook his head disappointedly. Apparently, he expected tears, tantrums, pleading. But Aglaya behaved with dignity. She helped him pack and said she would file for divorce herself. He said he was in no hurry. They just lived together for now. As soon as the front door slammed behind Cassiano, she sank to the floor and let the tears flow. Now Aglaya looked at their wedding picture and remembered how painful it had been for her. She took a vacation and stayed at home for a week watching TV. She watched motivational movies and tried to fight stress with cake. Aglaya loved kiwi cake. It was cheap, low-calorie, and very delicious. During that week, she got 3 extra kilos because not only did she eat diet cake, but she almost didn't get out of bed. However, on the 7th day, she felt better. She was proud of herself for surviving this period without alcohol. When she was younger, she had a habit of drinking wine in case of any minor problem. But now she was wiser and listened not to her heart but to her mind. He left her, that's fine. Life's not over. She began to exercise, lost weight, and didn't even let herself think that he would come back. Yes, they enjoyed their time together, but it was in the past. It doesn't matter anymore who was wrong or who was right. There are only facts. They are no longer together. That night, Aglaya couldn't find the strength to eat or take a shower. The memories made her sad. She felt exhausted and fell asleep. At night she woke up feeling cold. She closed the window, crawled under the blanket, and slept until morning. A week later, when the nurse was still at work, she got a call from Alejandro. "Hello, my love. How about going out to dinner tonight?" he asked. Aglaya understood that probably he wasn't alone and the comedy had already begun, or he was just practicing his acting skills. But still, it was weird to hear the words "my love." Although, it wasn't any different than the relationship with Cassiano. He also called her my love for years without loving her. "Hi, sweetie," she smiled. Alejandro smiled on the other end of the phone as well. He was standing in the room and an elderly married couple, his parents, were sitting behind him. "How about we have dinner tonight? I finally told my parents about us and they want to meet you." Aglaya was confused. "With your parents? So soon? Isn't it too soon?" she asked. "Come on, sweetie. It's just a formality, don't take it so seriously." Don't worry, everyone will like you. Let's have dinner and decide everything. That evening, Aglaya came to the restaurant right after her work shift where she gave lots of injections to the patients. Aglaya spent the entire day taking care of others, comforting them, and trying to cheer people up. After all, a positive mindset is half of success in the medical field. She barely had time to take a shower and change to go to the meeting with Alejandro. Her makeup was simple and her hair was loose. The short hair curled a little, showing her long and beautiful neck. There was no time to style her hair. She'd forgotten to put on her earrings and was worried about it all the way there. "Hi. You look stunning," Alejandro said. Aglaya thought she looked pathetic in her cheap dress, and Alejandro said that just to cheer her up. "I haven't had time to do anything, I just finished my shift. I'm a nurse, if you remember, and I can't spend all day at the beauty salons. I hope you understand." Alejandro frowned humorously. "You don't need any beauty salons. And I was telling the truth, you're really beautiful. If it were not for the circumstances, I would have fallen in love with you already," he said honestly and immediately blushed. Aglaya smiled, so his words were true. Lies wouldn't make him blush. "So, meeting your parents?" "That's right. And one more thing, I'm going to propose to you today. Later, the waiter will bring us 2 rings. This moment will be filmed. I needed to make my parents believe it. Are you ready? Just be natural. I'll do my best." They had dinner, and the waiter brought the ring on a large silver tray. Alejandro dropped to one knee in front of her, and Aglaya smiled. Suddenly, her and Cassiano's life flashed before Aglaya's eyes. The moment when Cassiano had proposed to her, the way he had looked into her eyes, promised her eternal love, and she immediately thought of how it had ended. Tears came to her eyes. Alejandro saw the change in her mood. "I love you and I want us to be together always and forever. Will you marry me?" "I love you too." Aglaya hugged him, hiding her tears. "Yes. I'll marry you." She could barely pull herself together. He was hugging her for real, trying to comfort her. A man with a camera stood behind them, blinding them with flashes. Aglaya took a deep breath and wiped away her tears. She was smiling. Alejandro was smiling too, but his eyes showed that he was worried. He put the ring on her finger. It was a beautiful gold ring with a stone that fit perfectly. They finished the ceremony and left the restaurant. Aglaya thought that now he would leave, and she would go home and have time to walk and clear her head. But a handsome blonde man in a suit suggested to take a walk. They walked down a night city street lit by lanterns. Alejandro took her hand. "No one is filming us right now," Aglaya said. "I know," he answered and squeezed her palm harder. "What happened at the restaurant? Did I open some old wound? I'm divorced. 3 months ago, my husband left for his mistress. She didn't want to give him any details. Besides, she probably looked pathetic at that moment, and he asked that question just out of politeness. I'm sorry, I didn't think I'd make you cry. It's okay. You know, since my husband left me, I've been all alone. There's nothing going on in my life at all. And that moment at the restaurant felt so much like real happiness, and it hurts to realize it was just an illusion. She wanted to be honest with him. It was easier that way. Lying takes a lot of effort, and you have to keep too many things in mind. Aglaya almost always said what was on her mind, except when it was necessary to be politely silent. She considered excessive and inappropriate frankness to be stupidity and lack of good manners. Me too. I've been single for over a year. And I wish it were real. I know what you feel. You know, if you wanted to, we could start dating for real. I mean, there's nothing stopping us from making it real. He turned to her and looked into her eyes. She suddenly felt like she was being too intrusive and even pushy, and she felt awkward. No need. I was just saying that because you asked. I'm fine and ready to continue playing in your comedy. Besides, it will be good for me to distract myself from negative thoughts and brighten up my gray everyday life. But right now, I'd really like to have some time alone, if you don't mind." Aglaya walked away, leaving Alejandro somewhere behind. He was standing there staring after her. "I'm such an idiot. She told me about the painful divorce and I suggested dating," he thought, turned, and walked back the other way. He remembered her eyes, her tears. He definitely liked her, but there was something more important right now. He needed to finish the job and not scare her off. It was more important than his feelings, more important than anything else in his life. The next step was their dinner with his parents. It was Aglaya's day off, so she had time to prepare thoroughly. As she picked out a dress, she thought about how she would have spent the day if it hadn't been for Alejandro and his fake wedding. She would probably have gone to the park, watched the couples with envy, bought herself a cake on the way home, and spent the next week hating herself for the extra kilos. Aglaya felt like she was on edge, one step away from depression. Alejandro picked her up around 8 in the evening. Aglaya was wearing a beautiful dress, high heels, a manicure, and makeup. Her hair was neatly styled, and this time she didn't forget about earrings. A ring decorated her finger as a symbol of fake love and loyalty to this foolish plan. It was uncomfortable to be around Alejandro. Aglaya knew it would come to an end soon and had already prepared herself for it. She felt like a silly, helpless kitten who ran after every passerby, hoping to get warmth and affection. And she scolded herself for really feeling something for Alejandro. She thought it was stupid and realized that those feelings had no future. He only suggested they pretend to be a happy couple for a while, but her subconscious was already painting pictures of a happy family. This is so stupid. Don't worry, my parents don't love me and they won't love you. It's just a formality. Are you ready? Alejandro asked, remembering how she had cried during the fake proposal. I'm ready. Why don't they love you? I think parents always love their children, it's just that different parents express their love in different ways. Sometimes children don't feel love because they're used to expressing it differently. Parents are programmed by nature to love their children, and children are programmed to love their parents. I'm not their biological son, Alejandro said, interrupting Aglaya's philosophical musings. Oh, she said. So I'm pretty sure they don't love me. But I don't expect anything from them, I have my own plans. They continued driving in silence. Soon the car stopped in front of a luxurious mansion. Aglaya whistled. You didn't tell me that your foster parents are tycoons. Well, they are not tycoons, just entrepreneurs. Come in and don't worry about anything. The interior was magnificent. Cold marble was everywhere, and the walls were also made of white marble with black veins. It was clearly designed by a professional. There was a huge sparkling chandelier in the center of the hall. Aglaya thought that the marble floor would not be safe for a child. It was cold and slippery. Perhaps Alejandro was right, he had been a guest in this house since he was a child. There were many different cutlery on the large round table. Aglaya saw this and got worried, for her knowledge of dining etiquette was not good enough. Alejandro's mother was a slender and graceful woman with a short haircut and large sapphires in her ears. His father, on the other hand, was overweight but looked very serious and even arrogant. So how did you meet? Alejandro's mother, Carmelita Gutierrez, asked. Aglaya was confused. They had not discussed the details. Alejandro smiled at her. I told you, she saved me when I was in a car accident. From that day on, our relationship began. The head of the family, Esther Gutierrez, poured himself a glass of wine. Aglaya politely refused the drink. She wanted to keep her mind sober. You have to be focused and calm when you're lying. Excuse me for asking, but are you pregnant? Carmelita asked. Aglaya felt like someone had plunged a knife into her heart. She looked coldly at the woman and replied calmly. No. What if Alejandro really wanted to date her? Then what? How would she tell him she was infertile? At their last meeting, he'd almost offered her a real relationship. Aglaya couldn't believe his words were sincere, but what if he really liked her? Would the fact that she couldn't have children have stopped him? Of course, like Cassiano. Alejandro wouldn't say it directly either, but in the future, that would be the reason for their breakup. That's good. Don't rush into things like this, she said. Aglaya noticed that Alejandro's relationship with his parents was cold. If that was the maximum amount of parental warmth his mother could show in public, probably in real life, their relationship was even colder. Aglaya had managed to endure that evening with great difficulty. When she and Alejandro were alone, stepping outside the gates of the mansion, she exhaled. The air was pleasant, the heat finally subsided, and the evenings were chilly. It's hard to endure their company, I know, Alejandro said. He stood so close and was so nice, unlike his parents. Aglaya wanted to spend some more time with him. After all, they could just talk, it wouldn't oblige them to do anything. Let's take a walk, she suggested. I'd love to, he smiled. They walked down the street, talking about all sorts of things. He didn't dare touch her hand again, she already turned him down last time. Even though she confessed that she feels sad because it's not for real. So you're an adopted child? My parents and the Gutierrez family were companions. I have a different last name, Diaz. My mom and dad died in a car accident. I was a baby, I wasn't with them that day, I stayed at home with a nanny. It so happened that my father was raised in an orphanage, and my mom's parents died early, and there was no one to take care of me. Then Carmelita decided to adopt me. But she didn't really want to help the orphan. I own half of the company. Once they got custody, they began to manage my money themselves. They invested it several times, and the deals were successful. The fortune doubled, and so did my share. So it seems that everything worked out for the best. So marriage is necessary so that you can be the owner of your money again? She asked, voicing her hunch. No, it doesn't depend on marriage. I can get my money in a year when I turn 25. We've already discussed it. If I take all the money and invest it elsewhere, the company won't survive. I'd really like to do that because I'm not interested in this kind of business. I wish I could just take my money and distance myself from my foster parents. No, I'm grateful to them for raising me. But you saw what our relationship is like. They never made me feel like a family member, and they never even called me son. Esther can't have children, so I was their only child. And Carmelita never wanted to have children. She always said she didn't like children. She was not made to devote her life to children. Then why do you want to get married? She asked. Alejandro didn't answer anything, he was silent. It's very personal, he said after a long pause. Seriously? Isn't getting married to you personal? Come on, there should be no secrets from your future wife. She bumped him in the side with her fist. Well, okay, you'll find out anyway. I didn't tell you about it right away because I was afraid you'd say no. The damn bureaucracy is the problem. I just need to be legally married, you know? A few years ago, I had a girlfriend, and I loved her. Are you talking about that girl you had a bad breakup with? Aglaya recalled his words. No, it was the other girl before her, my first love. She was an orphan, my parents didn't like her. They didn't like her style, her simple clothes. When I invited her home, she came wearing a t-shirt with a dirty word on it. Carmelita was shocked. I was young and stupid then, I was 18, she was 22. She was older, my parents had done everything to break us up. They bribed her. Agata took the money and told me about it. We used it to get tattoos at a salon and continued dating. Wow. Aglaya laughed. She was amazing, kind, but rude. She could say anything she thought, and she was always sincere. I'd never met anyone like her before or after. She loved tattoos and took me to rock shows. And she looked cool. I was 18, I immediately fell in love. But my parents never let us be together. I won't bore you with the details, we broke up and they sent me to the capital to study. I only recently found out why my father paid so much money for my education at the best university. Initially, he had planned for me to go to a local university. Who cares what kind of diploma I'd get? My place of employment was known from the beginning anyway. But recently, I found out that Agatha had given birth to my son and died in childbirth. Since she was an orphan, the baby ended up in an orphanage. Her friend tried to find me, but my parents intimidated her. They threatened to have her expelled from college and her parents fired. The Gutierrezes are a very powerful family. They can do anything. I made a scene at home. It's no joke. They deliberately hid the fact that I had a child and that Agatha might have been alive if I had been there, if she had given birth in a good hospital. I was so depressed when I found out. All this time I was sure she had just left this town and was living her life. My parents made sure I didn't find out anything, and my son grew up and is still living in an orphanage. He's 6 now, and I want to raise him. I found him and see him twice a week, but they won't give him to me because I don't have my own house and because I'm not married. Can you imagine? This cute little boy has Agatha's eyes. All this time he lived in an orphanage, and only when he turned 6 did he find out he had a father. And every time he asks me why I don't take him home. Why don't your parents help you with this? Aren't they powerful? Can't money solve this problem? After all, years have passed, don't they understand? Aglaya asked. They walked around the empty park that was opposite the Gutierrez mansion. It was warm outside, but the cool breeze made Aglaya feel a little chilly. Alejandro noticed it, took off his jacket, and put it on her shoulders. The pleasant smell of his perfume made her smile sweetly. She felt the warmth from his clothes. She was pleased that such a handsome man cared for her. They won't help me. They're against it. They're the ones who've been trying to hide it from me all this time. I found out about it by accident. I didn't know Agatha died, didn't know I had a son. Carmelita said I didn't need that child, and she didn't need him either. I was very young when it happened. She said that I wouldn't be able to devote myself to working for their company if I was busy adopting my own son. I don't know what's inside these people instead of a heart. Probably a money-counting machine. I offered money to the adoption authorities, but my foster parents were ahead of me. They told me Franklin Gutierrez came to them and threatened them. So they won't help me, and I won't get my son until every single requirement is met. In this case, they can't go against the law. So, I bought myself an apartment recently. I invested everything I had in it. The Gutierrez weren't even gonna help me with it. They're doing everything they can to stop me. I guess they realized that in a year, I'll get my money and their company would be ruined. My father would probably try to keep me from bankrupting them. To be honest, I wasn't planning on leaving the company. After all, it's my biological parents' life's work. But the Gutierrez crossed the line. My sense of gratitude to them is slowly waning. They saved me from an orphanage, but sending my son to the orphanage is mean. So you need a marriage to adopt a child? And I'll be a parent, too? Why were you afraid to tell me that? A young girl might agree to a sham marriage, but you'd hardly agree if I came to you and said, let's get married and adopt my child. I'm sorry for that little lie, but I couldn't do otherwise. It's very important. More important than honesty. Aglaya sighed. You shouldn't think of me that way. If I'd known you had good intentions, I would have agreed more willingly. I thought you needed some visa or wanted to get an inheritance that way. I grew up in an orphanage myself, and I know how important it is to get a child out of there. Alejandro stopped and stared at Aglaya. You grew up in an orphanage? Yeah, I don't have parents. They died when I was a baby. You see, your parents' companions adopted you, and I was less fortunate. I won't complain. I had great caretakers and I still have friends. But I'm sure childhood in a family is much better. Any childhood, even the childhood you had. No matter what your foster parents' goals were, they saved you from that. And that's a good thing. And you can fix everything else. I'll do everything I can to make sure your son grows up with you, don't worry, she said. Alejandro couldn't resist. He felt a kindred spirit in her when she told him about her family. The wind was fluttering her short curls of hair, and it was so beautiful. She turned out to be even better than he initially thought, kind, honest, sincere, and not greedy. He thought he wouldn't stop until morning if he started listing her virtues. He leaned over and kissed her. Aglaya was surprised by this. She had just been talking about her parents and some important things, and suddenly he kissed her. But she couldn't say it was unpleasant. So she kissed him back. She really liked him, and honestly, she missed it so much kissing on the street. Alejandro pulled away from her and looked into her eyes. He had to explain his outburst somehow. He didn't understand if she was mad at him. I didn't realize we had so much in common. Do you always express your feelings that way, even at work? Aglaya asked jokingly. Alejandro laughed. She was not angry, it's good. And she didn't hit him and even kissed him back, a good sign. They kept walking and talking about everything. They walked almost until midnight, until their feet got tired, and then Alejandro drove her home. He walked Aglaya to her front door but didn't dare to kiss her. Aglaya was saddened by this fact. She wanted him to do it again. It was funny, she had feelings for the man who would soon be her husband. Her fake husband. The marriage ceremony was scheduled for the end of the week. Everyone at the hospital congratulated Aglaya and asked about her fiancé. She briefly told her colleagues about Alejandro. After all, everyone remembered how they had met. But she was concerned about something else. What would happen after the divorce? They would all point their fingers at her and whisper behind her back. Aglaya doesn't know how to get along with men. The second divorce in 6 months. Awkward, but at least now she knew that the goal was really important. It was important to Alejandro that everyone believed them, and she would help him. After all, if his parents are trying to stop Alejandro, and moreover, deprive an innocent child of a normal childhood, it's really important that their marriage does not seem fake to anyone. Aglaya posted some photos from the restaurant on her social media profile and immediately got tons of likes and comments. Cassiano was the most frequent visitor to her page. Surprisingly, after he left, she had already forgotten what his profile on social media looked like. He liked her photos, and right after that, he posted a picture of himself with his girlfriend. His lady was nice and skinny. Her rounded belly was already very noticeable. Aglaya only sighed sadly about it. Before the wedding, Alejandro invited her to the cinema. She didn't understand whether it was a part of a plan or he really wanted to spend time with her. They had fun watching a good comedy. When the movie was over, they walked outside. "Did you like the movie?" she asked. "Yes, it's a funny comedy, but I wouldn't watch it again. I don't understand why everyone is only talking about this movie." "I totally agree. There were more rumors than the movie itself, a primitive story. But it was worth to watch it once. There were some good moments." Suddenly, Cassiano and his pregnant girlfriend showed up out of nowhere. "Aglaya, hi. How was the movie? Have you already watched it?" he asked as if they were longtime friends. "Yes, it's a great movie," she replied indifferently, taking Alejandro's hand. He quickly realized what was going on. "Hi, I'm Alejandro, Aglaya's fiancé," he said, extending his hand to Cassiano. "And I'm Cassiano, her ex-husband," he said. "Nice to meet you," Alejandro smiled. Cassiano's girlfriend was visibly nervous and didn't even look at Aglaya. "How long have you two been together?" "I mean, all this time I was tormented by conscience that I left for another woman, and it turns out that you cheated on me, too," Cassiano said. He was clearly hurt by the fact that Aglaya had a boyfriend. Of course, he was jealous. They had been together for so long. It couldn't just end and go away without a trace. Alejandro looked at Aglaya and smiled. She sighed heavily. "It's none of your business anymore, Cassiano. Let's go, Cassiano. As you can see, she's been lying to you all this time." "You should have left her a long time ago," his pregnant girlfriend said. "Seriously?" You ruined a family, got pregnant by her husband, and forced him to leave his wife, Alejandro said, looking into the eyes of the rude girl. What else could he do if his wife was infertile? She said, and dragged Cassiano away with her. Alejandro raised his eyebrows. Didn't you know? Good luck, man, Cassiano said, turning around. The unpleasant encounter was over. Aglaya lowered her head. Alejandro looked at her and lifted her by the chin. Is it true? Now you know, she said sadly. I'm not even a woman, I can't have children. Alejandro hugged her and kissed her on the lips. He thought it would help her. Aglaya was very upset, but the kiss made her feel alive. It breathed feelings into her, making the tears disappear. They kissed for so long that they didn't notice Cassiano was there again. You know, as a husband who has been cheated on, I can't just watch this, he said and tried to hit Alejandro. He deftly dodged Cassiano's hand and quickly hit back. Cassiano remained lying on the ground, and his girlfriend, seeing that the boys were fighting, not because of her, just turned around and walked away. I always knew you were like that, Cassiano said, getting up from the ground. Only people like you are capable of that. Don't compare Aglaya to yourself. Alejandro said menacingly, took Aglaya's hand, and walked away. Suddenly she stopped, looked at Alejandro, and asked, What was that? You're kissing me, hitting my ex, standing up for me. What is that supposed to mean? Explain, because I don't think that was part of our plan. We agreed to pretend to be a couple. But you're acting like I'm really your fiancé. Aglaya looked at him pleadingly. She was completely confused. This petite, short-haired brunette was trying her best not to fall in love with him because he had said right away that he would divorce her in 3 months. But now he acted like everything was real. And she didn't want to go through another painful breakup. I think that's what anyone would do. He was the one who started the fight. My father took me to Taekwondo when I was a kid. My foster father. Aglaya shook her head. You know I can't have children. I was afraid to tell you about it for some reason, but now you know the whole truth about me. I want to go home. Aglaya turned around and walked away. But a moment later Alejandro stopped her. He looked down at her. Today medicine is doing wonders and your infertility is not a final verdict. And even if it were, it wouldn't be a problem for me. I would be happy to adopt 2 girls and raise them with you. Aglaya didn't understand what he was trying to say. Was it all for real? Why are they even talking about this if their relationship is a lie? Cassiano also said it wasn't a problem, but he left me for his pregnant mistress. And before that, he cheated on me with her for over 2 years, and I knew that, but I didn't dare to leave. I don't want to live like this anymore. I'm better off alone. And when it's over, I'll get another divorce mark on my passport, and then I can finally just live my life without imposing myself and my problems on anyone. What on earth are you talking about? Don't you see that I really like you? I don't care about anything. I fell in love with you the very first time I met you. I just didn't think it could be mutual. The nurses told me you were going through a divorce. So I knew it. And the more I get to know you, the more I realize you're my soulmate. And that's not just for show, I mean it. Alejandro waited for her reaction, but Aglaya was silent. I'm going to die of nervousness. Say something. He couldn't stand it. Aglaya smiled, walked up to him, and kissed him on the cheek. You're just feeling sorry for me, like Cassiano. Everybody wants a family, everybody wants kids. And I do, but I can't give you what you need. And I'm not gonna burden someone else. Let's just leave it as it is. At least now I know for sure we're getting divorced. I don't want to give myself false hope and go through this again. Please try to understand, for me, it's like getting a knife wound where there was another knife wound. It hurts twice as much. She looked into his eyes with so much pain that it took his breath away. At that moment, she told him everything and shared her true feelings. Aglaya simply walked away, and Alejandro didn't dare catch up with her. He was sure she wouldn't let him kiss her again, would push him away. She didn't accept his confession, didn't believe him. And it was understandable. Their wedding took place in the presence of Alejandro's parents and Aglaya's friend. The ceremony was very modest, and then they had dinner in a small cafe. Aglaya acted like the happiest bride. It wasn't easy for her, but she realized there was no turning back. During the ceremony, she wanted to burst into tears again. After all brides cry. She was wearing a simple white dress, and Alejandro was wearing his business suit. Only the veil indicated that this was a wedding and not just a typical family dinner. However, the photographer took 1,000 photos. Aglaya posted a few of them on the internet to finish Cassiano. He should know that she's not just a miserable, lonely woman. That thought made her feel a little better. When they got married, Aglaya panicked. Just yesterday she was a fiancée, and soon she would be divorced again. Everything seemed to be spinning in some infernal circle in her life. Her head began to spin, but Alejandro held her hand tightly. This day he could kiss her as much as he wanted in public, and Aglaya would kiss him back. She enjoyed his kisses, his warm hands. After all, that was their plan. She really had feelings for Alejandro, and it was obvious to everyone. However, his parents only grudgingly pressed their lips, trying to keep silent. It was unclear if they believed their son and his wife, or if they understood that it was just a sham marriage. In any case, Aglaya could see that they were not happy for their adopted son. Over dinner at the restaurant, Alejandro's mom asked the girl who her parents were. "My mom worked at the school and my dad was an auto mechanic," she said. "Are they retired now?" "No, they died when I was a few months old. I grew up in an orphanage." Alejandro's mom raised her eyebrows and continued eating her salad. No sympathy, no shock. "You know, it's no surprise, Alejandro already dated an orphanage girl before you. He likes orphans a lot. Probably because he grew up without parents himself." "Did you grow up in a family?" she asked her mother-in-law. "Of course," she said as if it were her own choice and achievement. "Then you were luckier than me or Alejandro." The teasing was successful. Carmelita looked at her daughter-in-law reproachfully, and the dialogue was finished. When the dinner was over, Alejandro and Aglaya got into the car and drove to the hotel where he had rented them a magnificent honeymoon suite. Alejandro looked at her with admiration. He whispered in her ears that he loved her, that she was the most beautiful woman in the world. Aglaya smiled with just her eyes, making it clear that she didn't believe a single word he said. When they were in the room, she sat on a huge bed covered with rose petals. There was an ice bucket on the table with a bottle of champagne in it. "I hope you're not going to say now that we have to confirm our marriage and sleep together?" she asked tiredly. "No. I just want to say that I didn't lie once today. It was the pure truth when I told you I would be with you forever in joy and sorrow, and when I told you about my feelings." Aglaya shook her head. "I want to leave. My parents could have hired someone to prove our marriage was a sham. They asked me directly about it. I don't want to give them a reason to stop me." Aglaya got up and paced around the room. "Then, let me change my clothes, camouflage myself, and leave through the back door." The sun was shining outside the window. It was daytime. She didn't want to spend this day enjoying a fake relationship with a 3-month shelf life. "Can't you hear me? I'm telling you that I really love you." Aglaya refused to believe it, didn't let herself think about it, but she couldn't stop herself from feeling it. Alejandro came to her, embraced her, and pressed her against him. "You're my wife now and I don't want a divorce. Of course, I will not force you. But, at least give me a chance, since we are married." He kissed her and she could not help but return the kiss. Aglaya let go of her fears and worries and allowed herself to just give in to the moment. They had spent almost 24 hours together. She decided to give herself at least a few hours of happiness and joy. She decided that she needed to live in the moment since she wasn't going to have a long and happy life. After the wedding, Aglaya and Alejandro went to the adoption authorities and filed the necessary documents for adoption. Aglaya started to collect them a little earlier. Alejandro explained what to do. This procedure wasn't simple. Probably even astronauts undergo more simple examinations than people who want to adopt a child. The adoption specialist said that they have to wait, but most likely everything will be fine now. Alejandro and Aglaya walked out of the building. It was drizzling outside, and Aglaya was chilly, but she didn't want to get back in the car with Alejandro. After a night together, she just headed home and didn't pick up the phone for 2 days. She decided not to let herself expect anything. She realized they had no future anyway. He was a successful entrepreneur raised in a wealthy family, and she was just an infertile nurse grown up in an orphanage. Plus he, like Cassiano, had the love of his life left behind. Even though Agata died, Aglaya could hardly get what she wanted. She had given herself 100 reasons to give up hope, but the foolish hope didn't want to give up. And now she was standing right next to him, and he was looking into her eyes as if he really loved her. You know, this is the first time I've ever felt like the girl who spent the night with someone and didn't get a call back, he said. Aglaya laughed. Sorry, you know I just don't want to give myself false hopes. You are a silly and insanely beautiful creature, Aglaya. Okay, I won't insist. Can we at least watch a movie at my place tonight? I got a new horror movie, but I'm afraid to watch it alone. Horror movie? Okay. She didn't tell him that she likes horror movies too, but she stopped watching them because now she lives alone in the apartment. She just doesn't have anyone to hold her hand when something scary happens on screen. They spent another lovely night together. No intimacy, just pizza, a movie, and sleep. They went to bed together because it was scary to sleep alone after the horror movie. Falling asleep on his shoulder, she thought she could get used to it. And he thought he wouldn't divorce her, even if she wanted to. These meetings became a habit for them. Now, already after the wedding, they were going through that period that other couples had at the beginning of their relationship. Aglaya realized that she was getting used to him more and more, that she was waiting for his call and dreading the day when he would say it was over. A month and a half passed. Aglaya and Alejandro came to the orphanage and walked out with a 6-year-old boy. He was so adorable, so cute, he talked a lot, he had a lot of emotion. And he clung to Aglaya and wouldn't let go. He talked only to her, started calling her mom right away, and told her how he waited for her and how he missed her. Aglaya burst out in tears several times. She had not expected such a twist. Alejandro prepared a room for the boy, and Aglaya bathed him at home. Alejandro could hear them laughing, how easy it was for Aglaya to communicate with him. She became his official parent. The adoption was successful. Late at night, when little Roberto fell asleep, she and Alejandro were alone. You know, I didn't expect him to be so attached to me right away. I can say the same about myself. What? Aglaya didn't understand. I didn't expect to be attached to you right away either. Now that the plan is completed, it's official, I'm not going to divorce you. I want to be with you. And if I don't? She asked. It was important for her to check whether it was an act of generosity on his part or whether it was a real feeling. Cassiano had broken something in her soul, and now it was not easy for her to trust someone. You know, I'm tired of saying that I'm in love for real. But it's not just about me anymore. Roberto fell in love with you at first sight, too. I want you to decide right now, are you staying or leaving? We can't play with a child's feelings. So you have to make a decision. He was serious and even rude. Aglaya sighed. Things are different now, but not only because of Roberto. Tell me, honestly, is everything you told me true? It's true. He looked at her and thought he wouldn't let her go, even if she wanted to leave now. You know, Aglaya, I understand why you find it hard to believe. Do you think I'm playing games with you? I'm not. I can't imagine myself without you, and after the way Roberto clung to you today, I can't imagine you leaving us. You were so worried that you couldn't give me a baby. But now we have a child. You and I are happy parents now. He loves you like a mother. He spent 6 years saving up his love, and you got all of it. Isn't that enough for you? Aglaya smiled. That's more than enough, you're right. There was silence. Aglaya was preparing another piece of news for him today and didn't know how to say it. I don't need any more kids, I already have one. Okay? And if you want, we can adopt another child from the orphanage. That was the only problem, wasn't it? No, it's not just that. I'm also afraid you still love Roberto's mother. Cassiano also couldn't forget his ex and left for her, and it's not realistic to compete with a dead woman. Oh, my goodness. Who put such nonsense into your head? I was in love with her, but we were very different. She was older, she laughed when I wanted to cry. She got angry when I laughed. We didn't break up just because of my parents. It was just that we both knew we couldn't get along. We had more of a passion than a real deep love. Yes, I missed her, I grieved when I heard she was dead. But I can't say she's the love of my life, and I'm not going to put her portrait around the house. What would you tell Roberto about her? Aglaya asked. We'll tell him that he has 2 moms, one of whom is dead and the other is alive and well and working as a nurse. If you promise me that you will remain my wife. Aglaya shrugged. I will. I have nowhere else to go now that I'm pregnant. What? Alejandro was in total shock. It happened on the only night they spent in the honeymoon suite. I'm as shocked as you are. You know, it's such a strange feeling. Alejandro hugged her, and all her doubts collapsed like a huge wall separating them. He would be a father, again. She wouldn't leave him again, there was no reason for that. Aglaya sighed happily. Now she was expecting his baby. Perhaps it was fate, the Lord had not given her children in marriage to a man who loved someone else. But with Alejandro, one night was enough. A couple of weeks later, Alejandro took his son to a laboratory to do a paternity test. The woman at the orphanage told him that the boy might not have been his son. When he picked up the child, she asked him bluntly, what happens if it turns out that Agata got pregnant by someone else and Roberto is not his son? Alejandro said he didn't care, because now Roberto was his son anyway. But still, he wanted to know the truth. What would you do if he is not your biological son? Aglaya asked him. Nothing. I just want to know. I won't love him any less and I won't leave him. I don't even know why I want to know the truth. I guess I just want to know if Agata cheated on me. According to the timeline, he was conceived while she and I were still together. It's probably just selfishness, but I need to know. You can get that test done at our hospital. They take a DNA test and take it to the lab. Great, but I've already made an appointment with a private lab. Roberto and Alejandro left, and Aglaya only shrugged her shoulders. She was about to go to work when Alejandro called. He needed to go to the office urgently. The procedure was postponed, so he asked to pick up Roberto. Aglaya picked up the boy and took him to her workplace. There she took him for a DNA test. Alejandro's blood was already there because recently he had a scheduled checkup. He was still recovering from the accident. Alejandro didn't know that Aglaya had already done a DNA test, so later he did it again at a private clinic. The result arrived quickly negative. How could it be? I can't believe it. Alejandro hid this information from Roberto and decided to just forget about it. However, soon the results of the second test, which Aglaya had done, were ready. It was positive. Alejandro was over the moon. He went to the private lab and showed another test result from the hospital. It turned out that they had made a mistake and mixed up the test tubes. Someone else got the wrong result too. When the doctors sorted everything out, Alejandro received confirmation that Roberto was his blood son. He rejoiced like a child. Of course, it was important. Alejandro knew for sure that he wouldn't have stopped loving Roberto in any case. That wasn't the point. But it was important for every human being to have a continuation of the family. It's our nature, and Alejandro wanted Roberto to be his blood son. And so he was. Together with him, he began to visit Agata's grave from time to time. The boy felt comfortable there. He talked to her, told her about himself, just as Alejandro had taught him. He began to take care of the grave because there was no one else who could do that. Aglaya went there with them. She supported the boy, and he considered her his mother. 6 months later, when the Diaz family celebrated Alejandro's birthday, he came to the company and made a loud statement. "I will not take my assets away if we hold a vote. Now each of us has 50% of the assets. Let the employees decide who should be the president of the company." Esther pressed his lips together unhappily. "Why do you want to do that? You took your kid out of the orphanage, you live alone. You have no idea how to run a business, do you?" "You're wrong, Dad. My father used to be the one who ran the company. I'll be the boss or I'll leave. You have nothing to worry about. You'll still have the same money. I have a lot of long-term plans for the company. Let's each of us show our plans and let the people decide. These are my people and they won't vote for you. Who do you think you are?" Alejandro only shrugged his shoulders and said he would mention it at the next staff meeting. On the day of the meeting, Aglaya ironed her husband a white shirt. He wore a tie and a beautiful watch. She kissed him at the door and told him she believed in him. Alejandro went to work in good spirits. It was a win-win for him. No matter how things went, he was still happy. Even if the company burns down tomorrow, he has Aglaya and Roberto and will have a daughter soon. The meeting room was stuffy. The investors were sitting around the big table. Without their money, the company wouldn't survive. "I have accepted the challenge and I am ready to show you my long-term business plan," the head of the table, Gutierrez, told him. Alejandro nodded and sat down across from him at the opposite end of the oval table. It was a tough battle. Gutierrez talked about the current situation and how important it was to move in the same direction without taking risks, gaining stability and people's trust. When he finished, Alejandro stood up with his report. "I want to point out the little things that my father missed. First of all, the company's business is not going up. Now everything is being done to stabilize the situation. Our income a year ago was higher than it is today. I have analyzed not only our internal documents but also consulted with experienced specialists. Today there is an open niche which no one in our region has occupied yet. We can grow if we invest some of our assets in it. According to the worst calculations, we will simply go to zero, as we are now. But in case of success, we can raise the salaries of everyone who works in this company in a year. We'll expand into new territories. I've done the math. Check it out. We need a detailed analysis here. I suggest reviewing these papers tomorrow," one of the investors said. The meeting was over. Everyone went to review Alejandro's plan. The next day they met again. "We discussed it and decided that Alejandro's strategy has a good chance. Moreover, there are no risks involved. I don't understand why we didn't do it sooner. But this strategy requires him to be in charge. Alejandro, Esther said that you want to be a president. Let's vote right now." Alejandro sighed and looked up. He had expected anything but this. There were 11 people sitting at the table, including himself. And everyone raised their hands except for him and Esther. Esther also hadn't expected such a reaction from his companions and investors. Probably everyone was sick of his bad temper and wanted some changes. "Well, congratulations, now all the responsibility will be on your shoulders, son," Gutierrez said unhappily. From that day on, he never spoke to his adopted son again, but he didn't try to stop him either. He realized that if his son's plan worked, he would become even wealthier. Besides, he was already old and was tired of the constant stress. A little later, Gutierrez decided to take a break and went on vacation, and Alejandro was very happy about it. Everyone in the office thought that Alejandro had become the successor of his father and didn't know the whole background of their relationship. When Aglaya gave birth to a daughter, Alejandro's foster parents congratulated him over the phone and didn't even come to see the baby. That's when Alejandro finally realized they never needed him. Gutierrez just wanted to control the company alone, and his wife had to try on the role of a mother. A year later, the company, under the leadership of Alejandro Diaz, increased profits and entered the international market. The competition in this area did not let them take a leading position, but what Alejandro managed to achieve was more than enough. Aglaya and Alejandro's personal life was also fine. She gave birth to another girl and everything turned out as in his dreams, 2 daughters and a son. Roberto loved his sisters and helped Aglaya in everything, calling her mom. He was old enough to realize that she was not his biological mom. Besides, Alejandro didn't hide the truth from him. But the boy grew up in love and care and was happy.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe.